Sessions are starting now. Great. Hi, everyone. Great. I hope that means that you can hear me. I see in the chat. That's awesome. Thanks to everyone for making the time today. Appreciate the confetti as well. I just got a new computer and it's just not doing me any favors right now. That's okay. Appreciate you guys making it. My name is Dr. Emily Kubicek. I live in Los Angeles, and I work at the Walt Disney Company as a manager of data strategy. But today we're going to talk a little bit more about confidence, how we got there, and how I got to where I am today, and kind of a little bit of the issues that we're still contending with, because I don't think there is end of road for, oh yeah, I'm confident now and everything's super easy. So let me go ahead and start sharing my screen and we can get into it. Great. And the way that this presentation is going to be structured is that I'm going to walk you through my journey, and that's going to provide actionable tips to help build and master your confidence in tech. So it may not seem relevant at first, but hang in there, we'll get there. So here is a little preview of the journey I'm going to take you on today, and stay with me because I know what I'm about to share is absolutely not the same as your journey, but I know what I've learned throughout these ups and downs can help you in your confidence in tech today, just as it's continued to help grow my professional career. So first, I'm going to start out with, I think we can all say we kind of have these phases of life where we're generally on the up and up. We feel like the world is our oyster and we know that we're going in the right direction. I think this generally tells that story if you look at this journey here. Then we also have seasons of life where we are generally on a downward facing slope, which sounds a little bit of dramatic, but essentially I just mean, the vibes are off. Like I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but we're still going through it. Here's a quick view of what those seasons of life look like for me. So I'm going to walk you through the major milestones here and really get into those intrinsic and extrinsic factors that led me to where I wanted to be, but I never thought that I could be as a Mexican American in tech. But most importantly for you, and what I hope you get out of today, is I will show you how confidence, not coding skills, can really help get you from I'm not deserving of my interest in tech to they'd be absolutely lucky to have me, because it is possible. Okay, so you all saw that I was in speech therapy. So how did, let me just make sure really quick that this is sharing as I thought. Cool, I can see it, awesome. You all saw that I was in speech therapy. If you're able to scan that really quickly, how did I, a super sciencey and technical person, how I think of myself now, at one point think I was going to end up in speech therapy? I always had a childhood interest in STEM, and I just want to say, don't worry, this isn't one of those stories where I'm like, oh yeah, I always had a childhood interest in STEM. I built my own computer when I was 5 and I got a perfect score on the SAT. Absolutely not one of those stories. I just have a typical interest in it. Math seems cool, science seems cool, but that interest was never really encouraged in me. And here I want to be really careful because it was never discouraged in me from ever being in STEM related environments or activities. But I do have a single mom who knew nothing of that STEM world. There was no encouragement that existed that could have been given to me because no one in my community had it to be given to me. I can't be something that I don't know exists. This is the first major point I want to make. This is relevant to career progression and growth because Hispanic American people don't have representation in science or technical fields. You may think, and I really want to take a second, please listen because this might be you. You may think this does not impact you, that when you say you're going to do something, you're going to. Great, be headstrong. I have no doubt that you are very strong and can do those things. But imagine where you would be if you could see what you wanted to be from day one. That path that you took to get where you are, where you want to go, imagine it already having been walked. That it's been walked so many times that you don't even need hiking shoes to walk that path. We think that because we end up in the same place as other people, that we have now evened the playing field. Okay, I've kind of wiped all this out. Now we're all playing together, and I'm just as good, or which may be true, but or just as ready as those other people that are here with me. But this isn't the case. You think that you're kind of guerrilla style chopping through the jungle with a machete, trying to create this path for the first time. Doesn't matter because you ended up at the same place. Well, I'm here to tell you that it does matter. And by recognizing that you walked or macheted your way through that path that no one else before you has done, and I mean that, I don't mean that in general, like, oh, wow, you did it, you're so strong, but really, no one else who's in your same exact situation, you have done something incredibly difficult, and you are so good at doing incredibly difficult things that you think it isn't worth mentioning. And some of you may be thinking, that's kind of a dramatic way to think about it. I'm a hard worker. It's all good. It's a part of my personality. I actually like it. So I'm just going to keep on downplaying it. So I'm going to take a second to appeal to your reason as to why you should acknowledge your more difficult path. If you were able to briefly look at that roadmap that I provided, I'm a neuroscientist. Our brain, from language to motor function, operates off of patterns. If you do not establish the conceptualization that logically what you did was difficult, whether that's given societal norm, given financial situations, given your familial situation, given the representation you did not have to where you are now or where you want to go, your brain will continue to discount all of the difficult things you overcome. You will not get ahead because your brain will reset you at ground zero every time. So let me say this again. You will not build confidence if you do not acknowledge the reality of what it took to get you here. Your brain will simply not allow you to. Please don't do this disservice to your confidence, but at that higher level, don't do that disservice to your career in tech. So going back to that overview of the journey of what got me here. So we're going strong in the speech therapy realm. And by going strong, I mean my grades were whatever, and I was absolutely not really enjoying it. So I was honestly shocked, which is kind of funny, thinking back on it. Like, why was I shocked if my grades weren't that good and I wasn't really liking it? That I did not get into grad school, and I didn't get into any of them. There were a lot of them. And you have to go to grad school to be a speech therapist. So this was kind of my first big adult ego hit. I always thought I would be a speech therapist. There was no other option. So this is where I'm supposed to tell you, didn't get into grad school. This is my huge sign to get into tech. Now's the time. I threw myself into it and look at where I am now, right? Well, that didn't happen. I moved back home and applied to more grad schools for speech therapy. The following year, absolutely did not learn any lesson, did not take it as a chance to pursue something that I'd be interested in because that still wasn't an option. This is the only option. Speech therapy, that's all I ever thought about. I think it's all I can do. That's what we're doing. But upon coming back home for that year when I didn't get into grad school, I went where I still had confidence, which is sign language. I don't know, I didn't mention it, but in that path when I was in high school, I learned sign language. I would drive my local community college and just take classes for fun. Never wanted to become an interpreter. I just think sign language is really cool. So I genuinely loved doing sign language. And the reason I bring that up, what I want to hit upon here is the benefits of doing what you are not interested in and confident in versus what you are confident in and not interested in. So benefits of doing what you're interested in, confident in, sign language for me in this example, confident and not interested, speech therapy. I was super confident this is going to happen, even though I'm not really that interested in it. From a professional perspective, for where I wanted to go at the time, sign language would have been considered a complete waste of time. It was not. Enjoyment, interest is never a waste of time. And yes, I'm talking about professionally. I'm not just saying be a more holistic person, your mental health will improve. Absolutely great. I have no doubt there is research on that as well. But research that I'm referring to is that it shows that those who diversify their interests and activities are more resilient to disaster in other areas of life, which includes your job. So essentially, the more you diversify your time and knowledge, the more confident you will be in other areas of your life. So by pursuing something that I was interested in, I was able to build confidence in other areas of my life, including professionally. So I got accepted to grad school eventually, as you already know, with the little map, and hated it. I think we all could have called this, given what I've been saying about speech therapy. And if anybody knows speech therapists, absolutely wonderful, great people, especially those who work in schools, most patient people you could possibly imagine. This is a good example of how confidence can work against you sometimes. I was confident that I would work hard, which I think a lot of us can identify with that, because I would get the reward, which would be, becoming a speech therapist one day. I was confident that it would make me happy, even though that very much, was not true. Your girl convinced. I was very like, nope, we're going to do this. Don't worry about how it feels now. We're going to be happy once we get there. So anyway, I needed a job in grad school once I actually got there for speech therapy, and I got one as a research assistant in a lab on campus. This was a fully deaf neuroscience lab, and my sign language was not fluent yet, because remember, like, my hobby, I wasn't like ever thrown into it for fluency's sake, which I was confident in sharing that it wasn't that great in the interview for that research lab. And this was really one of the first times I saw how being confident in what you don't know can really be a catalyst for success. I absolutely see that now when I came into the professional world and I started admitting more externally, not to myself, I don't know what this is, explain to me. That's when I feel like a lot of things took off for me. Different conversation. But anyway, I got the research assistant job. Working in this lab was kind of the first confidence boost I had since STEM related, since elementary school, since I finished those like 100 multiplication problems before the time was up, you know what I mean? Those like really stressful ones. But it was great. I loved it. They loved me. They offered me a full ride into their PhD in cognitive neuroscience program, right? Crazy, not speech therapy. So now I'm in neuroscience, and unintuitively, the place where I had no neuroscience education and no fluent grasp on the language all of my classes were being taught in, which is sign language. This university is Gallaudet University, by the way. Possibly you may have heard of it. There's actually a show on Netflix called Deaf U, where they follow a few students, kind of learn a little bit of deaf culture. Definitely recommend. But this place where I was like, so foreign to me is where I really found my confidence as a person, which led me to finding my confidence as a professional, which I definitely see those as person, professional, building upon one another. So we're going to take a little bit of time to get into deaf culture, which is cool because, like, where else are you going to get that? And like, who else would you know who kind of experienced that very atypical culture from what we're used to here in our society? But we'll also see the parallels with our own, Hispanic culture as well, Latina. So for deaf culture, as in any culture, there are nuances, and no one can escape that. And I took them very seriously when I got to this school, and it forced me to evaluate what role I was playing in this society. Whereas typically, and I'm speaking a bit from like a neuroscientific perspective here, when we are in a society that we've been in since birth, which in this case would be a hearing society, we're more distracted with more macro or macro decisioning based on others. So for example, I'm thinking when I'm like in that situation, I'm thinking not only about what I'm going to say, a social or academic situation, which is totally normal, but now I'm thinking of it much more introspectively because I'm taking it on as a part of my identity, a part of my identity of who I want to be. When I say this, what is it saying about who I am as a visitor to this society? This helped me be incredibly in touch with how I feel about who I am. This made me feel incredibly in touch with like not only who I am prior to this, but who I am coming into this situation. And you would think that being in a situation where you're literally the only person of one thing, which I think we've all been in rooms like that, particularly in tech. For me in this situation, it was being the only hearing person with deaf people. We think of how are they perceiving me, not who do I want to be, regardless of the situation. That's a very subtle shift. Not how are they perceiving me is how we default to, but instead we should be asking ourselves, who do I want to be in this situation? Our typical American society, I should say, because people often think that they're exception to the rule. We all do it ourselves, of course. I'm definitely guilty of it. Or the cool friend in this type of situation. So like bringing it back to deaf culture, most hearing people are like, well, I'm like X. Most hearing people are like X, but I'm not. I'm more like you. I'm cool. Same thing. I mean, sometimes I've seen this happen as well. Some people say, "Oh, most Mexican people are like, why?" But not me. I'm cool like you guys. This is not a recipe for success when trying to be a part of any society. The identity you bring is the identity you should look to fulfill. That is the only identity that you will be able to truly be confident in subsuming. Otherwise, it'll always be a farce, and you will never be able to get that solid grasp of confidence to build in any area of your life, because this identity portion is so important. Confidence in your identity needs to be the foundation of your confidence as a professional. If that isn't built, it's going to be very hard to build those upper levels. And in this case, I was looking to fulfill that, like, I am the informed visitor role, which is neither like the ignorant visitor, I'm cool like you guys, or the people in which they're visiting. I'm not deaf. I'm not trying to act like I'm one of you guys. I could talk about this all day, obviously, especially in relation to Gallaudet, but I want to talk about this aspect of what is actually called deaf gain, because it's what really brought me into this true phase of realization where I saw no one can tell me who I am. And it's very interesting because it doesn't exist in our hearing society. So let's take a look. What is deaf gain? Deaf gain is the idea that being deaf and knowing sign language, you are not losing anything, such as your hearing or any other abilities. You're gaining other things. The ability to communicate through glass, no need to learn how to whisper. Culturally, you're much more straightforward than hearing culture. The list goes on and on. This strong identity with deaf gain is strongly associated with the knowledge of sign language. There is a prevailing stereotype that still reigns in place of very strong deaf communities. If you don't know sign language, then you are not really deaf. This blew my mind the first time I heard this. Think about it. You're deaf, you cannot hear, or you can hear some. A small note here, as a hearing ally, and I must say that never use the term hearing impaired. It's offensive to the community, calling back to deaf gain. There's nothing impaired about not talking, not verbalizing. It would be as if we were calling someone signing impaired. So if you don't walk away from this with like literally anything today, please know that only deaf and hard of hearing are acceptable terms. Anyway, so you're biologically deaf or hard of hearing. No one taught you sign growing up. And because of that, you're ostracized from a community that you probably didn't even know existed and until recently. And the identity of being deaf, something that foundationally lives within you, how can someone take that from you by saying you are not truly deaf? That concept blew my mind right open. And like, no one even had to walk me there. When they said, oh yeah, people think you're not really deaf, you don't know sign language, it's just like it all came to me all at once. That concept, like, how can someone say that I'm not Mexican, for me personally, if I don't know Spanish? My entire life, I've gone through people telling me I'm not really Mexican because I look white. I'm not really Mexican because I don't know Spanish, when the reality is I grew up in a Mexican household with Mexican cultural traditions, practices, but I was not taught Spanish because both of my parents' taught them that being American is better, English only. This does not mean, I would like to be very clear, that doesn't mean my white skin doesn't give me privilege. The colorism is a whole different conversation that definitely wraps into this, but it does not make me any less Mexican in terms of my identity. So I've since gone to school to learn Spanish, all of those things, but I think it's really important that even without that, who am I and who can say who I am? So this realization really opened up the floodgates for me, in the same way that not knowing sign language does not make you any less deaf. Not knowing Spanish does not make you any less Mexican. That confidence in my identity as a Mexican American person also created the foundation for me being confident in a professional space, because I was confident in what I was bringing into that space, because I now understood that those initial feelings of insecurity came from something that has always been and always will be beyond my control. So I'm sitting before you here, a manager of data science and engineering at my dream company. But, I would just like to put a little thing in there that, should corporations be our motivational goals for life, different conversation, but I am happy in my current position. But imagine a younger Emily about 6 years ago, which, by the way, was crazy to me. It seems like decades ago when I was writing this, not 6 years ago. A lot can change. Imagine where you'll be in 6 years and come back to this spot. You would have never believed how far you're going to get. Anyway, 6 years ago, it's Saturday. Okay, paint a picture for it. It's Saturday, middle of the day, in Washington, D.C., where Gallaudet University is. Sunny, sun coming in the windows. Alone. I'm on the floor of my apartment with a personal whiteboard. It's like leaned against the wall. My computer is sitting up on the dining room table. I have the marker in my hand and I'm looking back and forth from the computer to my whiteboard, crying. I cannot figure out the logic to this very simple line of code. I'm following one of the many free resources I found online because I do not have the time or finances to go anywhere else. And I'm thinking to myself, why would I think I could possibly learn how to do this? Something got me through that, and what got me to that point of still being willing to work through how difficult that was for me was I thought to myself, I've waited this long to become a scientist. It's like, offshoot here. Listen to that wording, by the way. I didn't say I'm learning to become a scientist when I was getting my PhD, when I was in school. I was actively doing science every day. I was a scientist. But even at that time, I asked my boyfriend, I was like, what should I call myself when people ask what I do? Maybe I should just say I'm a researcher. And because I didn't want to say scientist, much less neuroscientist, I was doing neuroscience actively every day. I simply felt like a fraud when saying it. But I'll get to the importance of language and all that at the end when I'm giving the tips. But I thought to myself, it took me this long to get to science, to become a scientist. I don't want to make the same mistake with coding and computers. If not now, when? So the important thing to remember here, even with the crying, because confidence doesn't mean things aren't hard, the importance of smaller acts of confidence building upon one another. I had the confidence to build, to be introspective about who I am and my identity. That got us to the confidence to understand who I want to be in this society, what I want to bring. And that led to the confidence to teach myself to learn to code in my professional life. When I learned to code, I was also reaching out with cold emails, scanning the internet for people who had no technical backgrounds, who are in technical roles now. Because someone with like a master's degree in data science for where I wasn't going to be helpful to me, right? I simply didn't have that. And I didn't plan on getting that. But someone responded to me who worked at Disney, and we kept the conversation going. I would say, I'm learning this, I'm doing this, thanks for this advice. And I do that probably every 6 months with this person, and I'm not asking for anything. Maybe I'd have an occasional question about if I should learn a certain technology, but this was all via email, so I never actually met this person. One day, she sent me a link and said, hey, Disney has this scholarship where they fly you out to Disney World and they set you up with networking events. This seemed so out of the realm of possibility. I wasn't even excited when I was reading it. I was like, thanks, but this reads like it's for computer science or statistics students. I have no project related to send, but I appreciate you thinking of me. She sent back, try anyway. So I sent off my projects and I made it from like an entertainment spin on it. I really sent it off and didn't think about it again. And I ended up winning. This is also the same mentor who, when I said, I feel like I'm hitting a ceiling with my coding because I'm teaching myself, alone on the floor. She said, well, it's time for an internship. And she said, she said, it's time for you to get an internship. And I almost remember like laughing reading that because I couldn't even like open a coding console at that point on my own. I was just doing individual lines here and there. She's told me that that's exactly what internships are for. Internships are where you can have no idea what you are doing with complete confidence, but you have to be willing to learn. So for time reasons, I can't get into my first data science internship where I barely knew how to open the console, but this absolutely highlights the importance, again, of that incremental confidence gain, confidence to reach out, confidence to continue the conversation, and confidence to trust your mentor where they're knowledgeable. The scholarship was essentially like about 20 steps later and a few like weird turns, but it led to me becoming a data scientist at Disney. I chose to talk about my journey today leading up to my current state as opposed to the challenges I'm facing today in regards to confidence because, and like, I truly mean that because even before this, I was sending a message to my boss. I'm like, should I word it this way? No, get rid of the just, get rid of the hey, or like the just say what you want to say. So I still struggle with it every day as well. But all of the things I've mentioned today feed into the decisions I make today, even though stakes are higher, situations are different. Every decision uses the foundational concepts which I've shared with you, which I've condensed in the following like tenets of confidence in tech. So something that's important, imposter syndrome, I want you to remove it from your vocabulary. No, it's not a situation where I say, because you're not an imposter. You can work through anything. I believe in you. I do think you can work through anything, but I want to dissect that a little bit. So a syndrome is something someone has. So when I was actively doing science, like I'm sure a lot of you are actively doing tech, we still felt like we weren't deserving of the name. So syndrome, that name, it means it's something that I held and that it's totally possible for you at any point in time to no longer hold that. This is putting responsibility on the individual who is struggling, who more than likely has every logical explanation to be feeling what they are feeling. Said another way, the use of the term imposter syndrome is just another way to shift blame from a historically oppressive society to the individual who has been historically excluded. I'm not saying it's easy, absolutely not, but we try to do our best to not play into this narrative. This will not fix the macro issue of historically established environmental oppression in the field, but it'll help your confidence in moving forward with the knowledge that the feeling of imposter syndrome is a result of a carefully curated environment that happened far before you got there and not your personal thoughts, actions, or skills. I briefly touched on this, change your language. Here's a few things that, this is the same concept as kind of that incremental confidence gains. Let me see. And I'm a neuroscientist that studied language. When you say you become how you communicate, I mean it in every sense of the matter. I would encourage you to make a challenge to yourself to no longer say just in any of your emails. Start here, start today. I don't care how small it is or to whom. Do your best to change your language. No small act of confidence goes unrewarded. That's that building that we were talking about earlier. And finding your mentor. Doesn't need to take place in a mahogany office over scotch. Doesn't need to be someone who you want to grow up. I have multiple people I think of as mentors, and I take what I want and I leave what I don't. In terms of finding mentors virtually, cold emails are a great way to start building your confidence. I can't get it on to you right now, but I have my contact info on the end if you want to talk more about networking virtually. I hit this hard during the presentation. You don't have to be a member of a group to you don't have to be a member of a group or of someone who's trying to be a member of the group, but you have to be honest about who you are and where you stand with it, and not trying to trick anybody into who you are. It's not going to work. We're not tricking anybody. So confidence in not knowing has really helped me throughout situations at work, and I encourage you to take more opportunities to say what you don't know. And last thing here, there will always be excuses. So, having that career conversation, asking for a raise, asking for a promotion, finally getting the courage to ask about that one project that everyone's been talking about for years, but you have no idea what it is. I know you have a million reasons why you shouldn't ask. Do it anyway. I have those same reasons and I struggle with it every day, but every small decision really does make a difference. So here's the list of all the things I went through. I do see a comment in the chat that it says, I disagree. It does give you privilege. I was saying that the color of my skin absolutely gives me privilege. It absolutely gives me privilege as a Mexican person to look white. Absolutely. But it does not make me any less Mexican, the color of my skin. So quick clarification there. But that is what I have to bring. Oh, my contact. My current work, happy to have you on LinkedIn. So please do connect with me. Tell me it's from here and I'll accept it. Absolutely. But if you want more information, I wasn't able to provide here because of time. Please go here because I truly want to help people get their piece of the pie in tech. And I want you to use my experience to get you there. I send out like little articles based on topics just like this one. Go there, submit a topic, or just ask me a question. Go straight to my email. I don't have time for a lot of what I wanted to share today. So I look forward to continuing the conversation there and seeing some of you guys pop up on LinkedIn, all of that. So thank you, everyone. I hope you apply those tips today, right now. And I appreciate you taking the time to be with me today. Thanks so much, everybody.